feel free to call me Rory. And if you're new around here, hi, hello, how are you? I like to create super dope art content and hopefully curate a chill atmosphere. So if that sounds like something that you would enjoy, maybe feel free to stick around to the end of this video and do all of the YouTube-y things that a lot of people ask you to do. And if you're not new around here, what is up, my dudes? I'm super excited to get into this video. Today, I'm going to be talking you through a painting that I originally did with watercolor, or at least started out with watercolor and ended up finishing with gouache, which is super different from how, I normally go about things. I tend to try to save things with watercolor, and if I set out to do a watercolor painting, then normally I see that through. But today, this one just wasn't working as watercolor. What I decided is that I needed to add more depth to the overall piece, and I genuinely think that it benefited for it. To start, you're just seeing the finished sketch while I outline it with a colored pencil that'll kind of go along with the color palette that I want to use for this painting. I ended up sketching this while my partner was playing a video game called Dredge, which I absolutely adore. I'm having so much fun watching it with him. By the time I do this voiceover, he's actually finished the game. He just finished it yesterday. And I don't know, I was really inspired the entire time that he was playing it, inspired so much that I end up kind of experimenting a little bit with my style, not only in this painting, just a little bit, but I push it even further in a future sketchbook spread that you guys will get to see. I'm just using my favorite colored pencil, Caran d'Ache Luminance pencil in, I believe it's burnt ochre. I love this pencil. I love this orange. I didn't think I liked oranges until I realized that ochres and siennas are oftentimes oranges or come across really orange. So the paint that you see me using here, the watercolor paint, is raw sienna from Winsor Newton Cotman. I love this color. You'll see me use it a bunch. But in the end, all of this ends up getting covered up because I just really needed more depth. Even though I brought up the game in a previous video, Dredge has just been a really big inspiration to me recently. I think that the really expressive, almost impressionistic art strokes brush strokes rather, that the game and artists and developers in the game used to curate the spot illustrations that you see of the characters is absolutely beautiful. And just the concept of these monstrous Lovecraftian fish swimming around beneath the ocean, I absolutely adored. And for a while, I've honestly been wanting to experiment with drawing more kinds of fish. Recently, I figured out how I wanted to draw fish and figured out what way I actually found really exciting to draw fish, but I haven't really experimented with a bunch of different fish, which you won't necessarily see in this painting, but you will see in the future. And the entire time my partner was playing this game, I honestly could not put my sketchbook down. I absolutely loved everything about the game. It just made me want to draw a bunch of fish. So that's exactly what I ended up doing. So you'll see here outlined are kind of a whole grouping of fish swimming together underneath the water. And the one in the middle has not only a third eye, but also a fish hook in its mouth, it was able to escape its captor, probably because it was a little bit weird. You'll also see that as this piece goes through an evolution, little eyeballs will kind of be drawn around him. And I was actually just really happy with the way that it all ends up coming together. But at this stage and at this moment, I was very concerned. The colors were so similar, I think, in tone, and the way that they were kind of pulling together was not, it wasn't working for me. And I was looking at the game and looking at fish images, and I just thought the depth was wrong. And the way that I go with watercolor, the way that I paint rather with watercolor, is very, very minimalistic normally. And actually currently in a sketchbook spread that I'm doing right now, I'm working on that because I really wanted to start being a little bit more expressive with my lines when I'm painting. And you'll kind of see the beginnings of that here in this painting, and then you'll really see it in the sketchbook set spread that I created today. I don't really know when I'm going to upload that or I have like a rough timeline and rough idea of what videos I want to publish before others, but other than that, I'm kind of just like putting them out there and doing these voiceovers because it's easiest for me to do a voiceover over something that I'm doing right now rather than trying to talk while I'm painting. It's just kind of impossible for me right now. It's way more manageable to do this. I'm literally looking back in like my past sketchbook to try and see how I painted the fish that I really love. I'm just really trying to, to make sure that the magic stays with this painting throughout most of the process until I start the gouache, and I just really felt like something was off. It was not working. And so you see me kind of grabbing Copic markers pretty early and trying to give more detail and add more depth and contrast to the piece. And in the end, it just wasn't enough with colored pencil and with watercolor. It really, really needed something punchy, especially in the background, to make the fish pop off the page. And so you'll see very soon I'm going to be reaching for that gouache. The blues and oranges that you see me using here are just a color palette that I found really inspirational from the game. It ends up getting a little bit grungier, and the colors themselves end up being a little bit less vibrant and a little bit more muted and soft, which I really like. And honestly, like blue and orange, it's just like a color palette that goes really well together. I've always found it really appealing. I hate purple and yellow, like, ugh. I do not like purples and really vibrant yellows, but maybe like a cool toned purple with like a really soft yellowy brown, that's a color palette that I can work with. But just actually taking like a grape purple and a lemon yellow and putting them next to each other makes me want to vomit. Like, I absolutely hate that color. I hate that color scheme. Oranges and blues I really, really like though. The color that I'm kind of adding into the background with the watercolor is, I believe it's St. Petersburg White Nights Indigo and Natural Black. They're beautiful colors, beautiful paints. I love them, but they just weren't punchy enough. You can really layer them and they can get very dark, but I don't know. I felt like the water needed to be more opaque. And so you're kind of seeing me go through an evolution of like, okay, maybe I'll darken it here and leave the middle light and add some like gradiating dots to kind of look like the water just floating around and mixing with itself, and reflections, and maybe the fish should be darker and the fish in the background will be a dark blue. And you're just kind of seeing me go through this process of trying to figure out what's not working with this painting. I genuinely felt like I was thinking about every decision I was making. I was just concentrating so hard on trying to figure out what was going on. I really wanted this painting to work. I was really excited by the sketch. I was really excited while I was drawing it because I love the video game Dredge that this is inspired by, and I really wanted to do it justice, and it was frustrating me that it wasn't working. So you can kind of see I'm adding more depth, getting to a point where I'm like, okay, this is helping, but I definitely can't leave the middle pale because the fish is too pale, and I just didn't feel like there was enough movement. And so very soon here you're going to see me really start to go in with these darker, heavier colors and figure out how to paint with gouache, because honestly this is like the first painting I've done with gouache in a while. In a way, though, it was really helpful to map out what I was doing with watercolors and then kind of see I don't know, and then make decisions with the gouache based off of what I had put down with the watercolors. Now, at a point in the video, I think something like smudged on my camera, so everything's got like a little bit of a glare, which is so frustrating, but I don't want to, I don't know, like give up on this video and neglect the footage because I was so happy with the end product, and I still feel like you can see what I'm doing. It's not taking too much away from what's going on, so I want to continue and push through and persevere through this video. So I hope that it doesn't bother anyone too much, and I hope that you can still see that this painting turns out really well. The smudge will go away eventually, and it'll focus back up on the fish. At this point in the video, I'm starting to add white gouache and kind of smudge it around and see what's happening, and that's when I realized very quickly that I just need to add gouache, and I need the background to be very, very dark to help the fish pop, even though right now I'm trying to make the little fish in the background like dark splotches. I just end up inverting it basically, where I'm like, no, the background needs to be darker so that the fish in the foreground really stand out more. You know, it just needed that contrast to work. I gave it one last go with a colored pencil, a little bit of marker, and it just does not help. It doesn't work. I'm trying to add more definition to the fish in the background, and I'm just like not happy with it. And I'm just genuinely, I keep like pulling back and looking at it, and for you it's like 2 seconds of looking at it, but for me it was like a whole minute of just staring at this fish and trying to figure out what to do with this painting. I even get to a point where I'm so desperate that I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just do just like what I did with the ducks that I wasn't necessarily happy with, and just start lining it with the ballpoint pen to see what happens. And it doesn't help, and that's when I really hit this breaking point of like, okay, the ballpoint pen did nothing. It didn't save it. I need to figure out what's going on because this is just not it. I'm genuinely just staring at this painting like, come on, bro, work with me. We've got the vibe down. We've got the idea. The fish look stupid and derpy. I just need to figure out how to make these fish work and be more contrasting with the background. And yeah, so as I'm outlining it and realizing the hopelessness of my situation, I look down and I'm like, okay, maybe gouache is the only thing that I've got left to do. I was really happy with the variety I was able to get with kind of like the expressions in the eyes of the fish, and even now as I've just done more practice and doodled more and sketched more, I know that there's so much more that I could even do, and that's really, really exciting. But in terms of this painting, I was really happy kind of that each fish stood out on its own, even though now I've studied a few different kinds of fish and different shapes. I just always felt that like the softer shapes fit more with the way that I wanted to draw naturally, but I've actually found that I love using these really sharp, kind of very impressionistic brush strokes when I'm painting, and it actually works really well, this new style of painting that I'm trying out, with a bunch of different shapes. And it's not necessarily that I need to draw soft shapes, it's just that I need to paint them in a way that makes them look cohesive and work together as, you know, my style, so that when you look at this painting versus a painting of like a flounder, which is much more triangular and much more angular in general of a fish, how can I make these, you know, a round fish like a sunfish and a sharp fish like a flounder look like they were drawn by the same person? Because to me personally, that is important. I do want to have an overarching style. However, I do know that there are tons of people out there that genuinely believe that just the fact that they created this art is enough to make it theirs. And it is. It absolutely is enough to make it theirs. I'm not saying that my art isn't my art unless it looks like a specific style. It's just that I personally strive to have my style be recognizable and be something that I take take pride in, where I think I have watched a few different YouTubers. I wish I could come up with a name off of the top of my head, but I have watched a few different YouTubers who are completely fine with not really having a style at all and just drawing all kinds of different things in different styles and different ways, and not even out of experimentation, but simply because that's how they want to draw. They want to practice in all of these different styles and be able to draw like a cartoon like SpongeBob and then turn around and draw a very accurate depiction of their favorite anime, and they can do that. I cannot do that, and I've made it kind of my goal to be able to find a style that I can draw anything that I want to in. And it took a very long time to get comfortable enough with the way that I draw to be able to go, you know what I want to draw today? I want to draw a fish, and actually understand where to start to make this fish, I don't know, to be happy with this fish sketch and drawing or painting. It took a really long time for me to be able to draw anything that I wanted to. I felt like I was kind of stuck in a rut for a year or two where I was kind of drawing the same things. And it's fine to get good at drawing the same things, but when I wanted to adapt how I wanted to draw to other subjects, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't figure out what to do, and I couldn't figure out how to translate how I draw chicken into how I want to draw a newt, and to make them look the way that I want them to, and to make them look like they came from the same universe. You can see here I am finally going in and realizing that I want the fish to be the lighter portion of this painting, and I want the oceanic background to be the much darker part of the painting. And immediately adding all of that depth helped so much with the fish and helped distinguish each fish, give them all an individual silhouette. It really helped them pop off the page. And even from like right now to the end of the video, you're gonna see a huge evolution from this painting, or that this painting goes through. Like, even now, it's not half of what it will be. Like, I love the texture that I end up adding in the end specifically. It was really, really, I don't know, it was kind of just like something that happened where some of the gouache was kind of smudging a little bit. I think I start by adding little smudges in white, which you can kind of see, not the nice neat ones. Those are supposed to be kind of like fish, but the ones where I've kind of dry brushed with that angular brush that has the grippy on it. Where I've dry brushed, I really loved that texture, and so I kind of went, what if, I don't know, I started kind of creating depth through overlapping different textures, and that experimentation led me to what will be the final product of this painting. And you can kind of see me start to do that here, where I'm kind of taking an orangey color and I am smudging it over the fish, and then eventually you're going to see me just play this tug of war game with orange, white, and blue. The gouache colors that I'm using are both from Winsor & Newton. I adore Winsor & Newton's designer gouache. It is like butter. I've never used a gouache like it, and I've used Arteza, I've used, it starts with an H. Everyone uses it. Holbein. I've used Holbein Artist Gouache, and I do not like the Holbein Gouache that much. It's not necessarily chalky like the Arteza Gouache, but it does not re-wet as beautifully as the Winsor & Newton, which is fine. A lot of people don't put gouache in a palette, but I really like to have everything kind of squeezed out in a palette so I understand exactly what I'm working with and I can bring it all with me very easily. My biggest complaint, and one of the reasons why I don't use gouache that much, is because the selection of colors is just so lacking compared to watercolor, where you have brands like Daniel Smith that have just an absolutely massive range of colors, just an abundance to choose from. So I tend to not use my gouache that much because I don't have a lot of the colors that I want to have, and I can't even really mix them, but I am starting to, as I've mentioned, get back into gouache painting, and I'm doing some like little practice paintings and things like that, especially with landscapes, because I feel like the way that I naturally want to paint a setting in a landscape really lends itself nicely to gouache. And getting back into it, I've actually been a lot better about mixing my own colors and kind of figuring out how I want to go about dealing with such a limited range of colors to me. Or at least it's limited to me. I know for a lot of people, they can work with 6 colors and be perfectly fine. But as you can see in my watercolor palette, I have between 30 and 40 colors. And, I still have a few more that I want from Schminke and Roman Small. And I do want Daniel Smith's Green Earth. I do have my eye on that color. There's a really long period of time where it genuinely is just me really trying to figure out how I want to go about, finalizing the piece. Like, when will it feel finished in gouache? I didn't know. And so I'm using all these different, sized brushes, kind of trying to figure out and get a feel for what it is exactly that I'm trying to accomplish with the gouache. And in the end, I just end up absolutely loving the angled brush for gouache. And it's currently what I'm using right now in my sketchbook as I paint a, what would you call it? Like a setting, a landscape study, also inspired by Dredge, because I just can't get enough of the game right now. I promise it will end soon, but I love the game. I'm so disappointed it doesn't have an art book. It has a digital art book, but not like a nice physical, beautifully done, beautifully bound and designed sketchbook. So sadly, the only way you can get your hands on the art physically is if you want to print the sketchbook out yourself, or not the sketchbook, rather the art book. But that's, probably pretty expensive from FedEx, and if it's not set up the right way, it won't even work. So all of that to say that it doesn't have an art book, but I find the art from the game incredibly inspirational. Obviously. This is the point in the video where I really start to smudge with the Payne's Gray color that I'm using. I don't think I ever mentioned the colors, so it's Winsor & Newton Designer Gouache, Raw Sienna, and Payne's Gray, and that's literally it. Oh, and then, you know, a tube of white gouache, but I have like 40 different tubes of white gouache, and honestly, in the end, white gouache is white gouache. It almost always works the same. I kept my Arteza tubes for a while because, hey, it's just white gouache. It worked just fine. I start adding these thicker outlines and just really trying to make sure that the fish stand out as their own individual silhouettes from each other and from the background. This painting took me a whole day of like stepping away from it, letting the gouache dry, coming back to it with fresh eyes, and trying to dissect what was going on, what I wanted to change, what wasn't working, what I liked. It was really genuinely a process. And I end up really disliking the way that the ballpoint pen is looking with the gouache. So I end up going over it with like just a really thin, like I think it's a size 4 brush with the Payne's Gray, and just going over everywhere that I lined just to make it, I don't know, feel more cohesive. The ballpoint pen just really stood out, especially in the eyes of the fish. It just wasn't looking right. It didn't look textured like the rest of the piece, and it just was glaringly obvious that something about that needed to change because it really interrupted the flow and the textures that were going on with the fish in the background. And it's really in the lining with the Payne's Gray and this size 4 brush that I feel like the big kind of weird monstrous fish in the middle, the focal point you could say, really starts to stand out and come together, and I start to feel a lot better about it because, I don't know, there was something about those textured lines and the change in width and thickness of the lines as I used the paintbrush that really helped the fish just start to look like its own thing, like it was part of this painting, like I did all of this intentionally. In the end, the whole painting took like a whole day of just taking breaks, stepping away, coming back to it, stepping away, coming back to it. And I did do it in one full day, and I was really happy with that because I think that that was a pretty good pace for me. I've been known to, you know, like, I don't know, just paintings sometimes can feel very daunting, and I don't always finish them in one setting. So it was really satisfying to be able to peel the tape at the end of the day and know that I started from just some pencil sketches on a piece of paper in the morning. The end of the video is really just me making a ton of micro decisions about where to add more texture, what to outline, what to leave in the background, to make sure that everything kind of looks like it's overlapping in a way that makes sense, and that the motion of the piece is really coming through. And just all of these little brush strokes that help pull everything together and make everything look like it belongs together, and make sure that nothing stands out too much as well, to make sure that it all just looks like it's supposed to be in this painting. Keep some of the fish a little bit more blurry, and then other ones I purposefully outline and add more detail to, so that way hopefully they kind of look like they're in the background and in the foreground and overlapping and interacting with each other, because that's something that I really wanted to do in this sketchbook, was just make sure that I had more pieces, more doodles, more paintings, where I was really pushing the way that things are interacting with each other. And I know that this piece is just a bunch of fish swimming, you know, they're not doing much, but they are doing a lot, you know, and you can make it look like a lot if you want to as an artist. And so I tried really hard to make sure that the piece was fun and interesting to look at, and I hope that that came across. For a final touch, I end up kind of going in with a Tombow brush pen just to outline some things, and then I was just honestly happy with the way it was looking. So I decided to do a final tape pull, which wasn't that satisfying, but honestly, like, seeing the painting with that nice clean border was satisfying. That was really nice. And I go in, fiddle a little bit with some like colored pencil, and then it's just like, you know what? I think this thing is done. I think we're good. And that's the painting. It's honestly been so long since I've used gouache. I didn't even realize it could be this fun. The painting, honestly, I was really, really happy with. And the texture made me like so excited for some reason. And it's really inspired me to start adding texture into other spreads in my sketchbook. And not just with gouache, with watercolor too. And to try and figure out how to make this way of painting with gouache merge with the way that I have used to paint, oh my goodness, the way that I guess I tend to paint with watercolor, because when it comes down to it, I've kind of developed a new style in this last like day, trying to figure out how to make this gouache and watercolor painting work together, because I paint so neatly with watercolor, but then I want to add all of this texture with gouache, and it's something I've battled with. It's something that I've battled with for years, just trying to figure out, I don't know how I want to paint. And I'm really excited by this new way of painting, and I hope that you guys are too. And I hope that someone, stuck it through this video and has decided to, I hope that someone stuck through this video and was inspired by what I've done, because I'm really happy with this one. Okay, I'll talk to anyone who comes back or anyone who ends up joining me in the next video.